I just want to say hello. And Abby's going to put a link in the chat right now. And we want to know, what was some advice that you received, some practical leadership advice that you've received as we're welcoming people in. So please, Abby, thanks for putting that in the chat. And we're just going to listen to This Is Me.
I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me.
If you have the urge to sing, please do so. We're fine with that. Great group we have. Michael from Malta. Love him. Tell us about the advice you received. Hi, Mandy. Good to see you. You want to move right to left, right?
This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me.
This is us. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I am thrilled that everyone was able to find the time to be with us today. I see some smiling people, even though it seems like it's nighttime. I have some friends here as well, so it's just beautiful. So thank you for being here. So we're going to start off with some advice that you have received, and welcome to this Women in Education, our first event. I'll be introducing our SIG in a minute, but I just want to first start off with you. And what was some advice that you received? So let's see what you have written. I love seeing the advice because I think we can always learn from our collective wisdom in the room. So, oh goodness, we have some great things here. Best advice: those who try to achieve more than those that don't. Thank you. At the start of every school day, tour the building and check in with staff. Building human capital. Love that idea. Do not focus on the negative feedback only. How many of us have done that? You could have 20 staff members saying positive, just what you've done. You have one staff member that says something and you can't sleep the next night. Why is that? I don't know. I can tell you why. Just listen, listen, listen. And we have leadership is not about titles. Thank you for the person who put this quote in. It's about one influencing another. Building relationships. There's a lot about relationships right now. Take the time to build connections and work to multiply. Look at all this. Thank you so much for sharing some of your practical advice, because that's why we're here today. Thank you for that. And I'm actually going to tweet that out as well, so we can talk about the wisdom we have so far. Well, I first want to introduce myself. My name is Nancy Squiccirini, and I am part of the Women in Education Special Interest Group. And I have to admit, we have some members of the team here. So there's a big shout out. I see that Pauline is here. Big shout out to Pauline. She is a committee member. We have Liz Fries. She's also a committee member. And our other members are Proserpina, we have Erin, and we have Neve. Now, you might notice that Neve is not here today. Neve is quite ill, but she has a cold, not COVID, but we wish her all the best. Oh, Proserpina's here. Yeah, girl. Yeah. So we have our committee here, and our committee is one that promotes connections. We are one that want to have a community where if you need support. And Abby has put a link in the chat so you can learn more about our committee and what our values are. So thank you, Abby, for doing that. When we do virtual facilitation, we believe in the concept of the heart, the head, and the hands. And what that refers to is, first of all, the heart. We want to start building a community. So in the chat, if you want, please put your email address and somebody. Make sure everyone's on mute. Okay, there we go. And it's building community, because after we leave this session, we want to continue the conversations and also continue these discussions. So we like the heart. The head are the provocations. And the provocations are ones that we want you to think about, and also ones that even after this section make you reflect. And the hands refer to these takeaways that I always believe that once you spend, and we're honored to have your time here today for an hour, that once you leave, there is a change in a belief, a behavior, or even the state of being. We want it to be transformative rather than transactional. Transactional is when you go to one of these virtuals and you sit like this the whole time. Or you're actually shopping on Amazon while you're logged in. We want it transformative in terms of there is that change in the belief. So let's move on to how we're connecting. Put your Twitter chat in the handle. If you want to tweet, that's our hashtag. Camera on and off, that's up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. If we have a breakout session, which we will now, please put your video on just so we can see your beautiful eyes when we are in the breakout session. Now, our topic, advice to our younger selves. And we have two amazing guests that I feel very honored that they would be here. We have Estelle Hughes, who this is the first time I've met Estelle. I just told her when she entered the room that I'm a groupie. I've been watching her YouTube videos. Anytime that I see her work when it comes to diversity and inclusion, she's one of the people that I always go to when looking at who and what she is as an educator. Besides being the secondary principal, she's also the director of an NGO, which is the Africa Learning International. And she's also, besides being a teacher and educator, she's a researcher. She's someone within the international community, which I truly feel makes an impact in terms of her voice and who she is due to her integrity. And like I said, I just met her today, and I have to admit, I feel like I know her only because I've been so aware of her work. So let's do a big round of applause. You can unmute for Estelle. Yeah. Ooh, yes.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
We
Thank
love
you very
her.
much.
We love it. And then we have someone who is very, very dear to this organization, which is Cam. Cam is someone who I would say her strength is her ability to build relationships, connections, to make a positive impact, not only on an organization, but also in terms of student learning. She's committed to social justice, equity, to diversity. Her work with the task force, I think, has been instrumental within international education. And she really is a learner herself. And I know from just working with her on this team, she's one that is greatly respected due to what she models of what she feels is the expectations of a leader. So these are our two guests. And let's give Cam a big round of applause. Yeah. Happy about that. So everyone, we're going to be breaking this down into 3 areas. And I'm going to actually stop the slides because we want this to be a discussion, and it's a small group. So that means if you have a question, don't wait to the end. You can just let us know, put your hand a reaction or whatever that is called, the hand, that yellow hand, and you can ask Cam, Estelle, or even anybody here, because we have so much wisdom right here in terms of our own experience. And maybe someone has a question that maybe you've had experience that you can actually share in terms of what you've done, and also advice that you might give to somebody else that's in this room. So let's first move to our first area, which is school culture. And I'm going to start with a quote, which is, culture does not make people, people make culture. And what I would like to do is have both Cam and Estelle think about the topic of this session is advice to your younger self. And we're looking at school culture in terms of the impact it has on relationships and connections, and also the idea that relationships of the adults actually impacts the student learning. So I'm going to start with Estelle in terms of how do you respond to school culture, advice that you've had, and the impact in terms of an organization.
Happy New Year, everybody, and thank you so much for having me, Nancy, Sarah, Cam. I am so grateful for this invitation and the opportunity to share with sisters. That's all I see around the table. This is such a special time, a special idea to be here with you. Right, school culture is everything that that encapsulates what we do at school when no one is watching, really. that really shows who we are and what our reflexes are. My hope personally about school culture is that no matter what the choices we have made in terms of what we want to highlight, that we have a culture that is inclusive, where everybody feels that they are part of something bigger than themselves, something that they respect, something that they look up to, so that, you know, everybody within the organization feels that the idea is being lifted, being transformative, as you say, rather than transactional. To me, that's what school culture is.
You know, Estelle, you brought up such a beautiful point. It's the behaviors you do when no one else is looking. You know, in terms of just behaviors, and it's not just behaviors, I think it's also how we speak to one another as well, with that inclusive language and all what you're saying. I love the idea that it's embedded. Cam, to follow up on Estelle, what do you think in terms of following up on that?
Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. Before I start, I'd like to say congratulations to Nancy and Liz Free. They were named on the ECIS research as influencers, disruptors. So well done, ladies, and absolutely no surprises there. And if there's anyone that I'm missing, that I missed their name, please forgive me. It's really wonderful to see so many of you, so many friendly faces. Atlanta, I can see Loretta, who I spoke with yesterday, so many people. So thank you for joining us. For me, an important part of culture in the many places I've worked. So I've worked in business. I've worked for Barbara Cartland, who was step-grandmother to Princess Diana. So it was a really interesting culture because I mainly worked with 50-year-old white men that had all been to Harrow and Eton, and I was a 30-year-old woman of colour. And culture for me is about respect for everybody and for everyone to have a voice. I've also worked in schools and organisations. I actually left a headship role because of the new people that came in and weren't giving everybody an equal voice. For me, having that equality, for everyone feeling safe enough to say what they think and how they feel is really important. And I think that's a culture we have at ECIS. And actually somebody commented on it this morning. I'm in our office today in London, and I was working with Caroline Davis, who's our membership and office manager. And we were discussing actually this piece of work that's happening this afternoon in our first event. And, you know, and some of the things that she was saying, I'm going to share today, you know, that culture of everyone having a voice, everyone having equality is really important. And I think as women, it's wonderful. And as leaders, if we can represent that in any workplace or in any situation we are, because it's always important to be authentic. And I always say this to my family. I say, I'm this person at home, I'm this person at work, and I'm this person when I'm out with my friends, you know, doing whatever I want to be doing. And that's really important to me.
When looking, thank you, because both of you mentioned the idea of respect and inclusion, which I think right now is such a need when you're looking at international schools. What advice do you help leaders who don't know where to begin when looking at providing channels, or because sometimes I've been to several events now when looking at equity and DEIJ, that they're overwhelmed. They don't know where to begin in terms of looking at their own school culture and monitoring and accessing how do we ensure those voices are respected. What would you say to them in terms of a starting point? Because they're overwhelmed. There's so much out there. They don't know where to start. Estelle, where would you first advise a leader?
At the International School of Dakar, there is one motto that you'll see everywhere at school. It's Nyofar. Nyofar in Wolof means on est ensemble, means we are together, we are one. Everywhere you look, you see this phrase. And the way we have approached it at our school is that every voice matters. The voice of the student, the voice of the support staff, the voice of the director, the voice of the teachers. Everybody has a say. And this is implemented via our listening sessions, intentional, planned, calendared listening sessions with everybody in the school. And we get to celebrate what's going well, to express where the needs are, where the frustrations are. We don't shy away from difficult discussions. It can go from the support staff highlighting the fact that they retire without a package, and the school reacting by creating this package retroactively with everybody in the organization making a small sacrifice. To students writing to me today saying, Miss Hughes, we heard there is a director advisory committee, and we want to be part of it. We think our voice matters. And obviously, the director will invite them to the next committee, because that's how we work at the school. There's no one whose voice does not matter. So when the parents come to school, the first thing that I do is sit them with the students, with their new student, and say, this is the culture of the school. Everybody is respected. We are in a village where we co-educate. We all co-educate, not only the teachers, all the adults here need to be respected as educators.
I love the idea of intentionality, that as soon as you have a new family, you actually are that direct to say, this is who we are as a learning organization, that intentionality. And Cam, how would you, in terms of giving some leadership advice to someone who's trying to start looking at their inclusion?
Yeah, I think in the world of 2022 and 2023, it's really easy to be overwhelmed with all the different things that we have to deal with. And you may have heard us say this at ECIS before, you know, it's a ripple effect. Little change, little drops bring change. You know, if you think about, you know, a drop in the ocean, all those drops together make a wave. And that's what you have to think. And I say this to heads all the time, just do little things. I speak to heads all the time. I probably speak to 20 heads of schools a week. And actually, I just spoke to somebody before this call, and we talk about books. So I am a bibliophile. I've always been a bibliophile. I can remember going to India when I was a child for 9 weeks with 3 books and just kept reading them on a cycle. And I always say to people, reading books is such a wonderful thing to be able to do. Here at ECIS, we run the biggest libraries conference in the world. And I always love how they speak about books. And, you know, people say, well, why do you read fiction? It's such a wonderful way to learn about relationships and how human connections work. So I always say that to people. And I was speaking to Frank Tassan actually in Dusseldorf, and we shared a little book that, you know, he gave me one and I gave him one. So I think do little things. I also worked with the British government on the nudge theory. And, you know, and apply that to little things you do. Don't be overwhelmed. Just think, what can I change today? You know, what little things can we do? And the other thing that's always really powerful is if we can come together in what we do. You know, women who bond together bring huge changes. You know, look at the UK. I was reading something yesterday, actually, about how the vote for women was established in the UK just by a group of women like us coming together. And, you know, making huge changes. So I always say, just do little things. You know, when you're younger and when I'm going to change the world, we think we're going to do massive things, but little things is incremental changes is what brings real change. So I always think about that, you know.
So my 2 pieces of advice, not mine, but your 2 pieces of advice, I would say, to summarize this part is really, number 1, looking at that intentionality, is you actually stating it in terms of who you are. And then following up with Cam is that small, I agree with you. I think some leaders feel like they have to put in a continuum. They have to all of a sudden create a whole new role, or they have to revise the entire curriculum, but instead look at what those small actions can have that big effect.
Absolutely. And can I do my magic trick, Nancy?
Yes, do your magic trick. Go ahead.
My magic trick.
Please do it. Do it.
So, I don't know if you guys know, but ECIS is a really small organization. 8 people work here. So you know that we do quite a lot of work in DEIJ. You know, it's my life's work. So if you've all got a device, I just want you to type in DEIJ, and I'm going to do it as well. Everyone type in DEIJ to their device. Okay, and tell us when you've got an answer.
Well, what we'll do is wait, we'll tell them to put it in the chat on the count of 3 and see what it is. Let's see if we all have the same answer. So everyone, what you see, don't show them yet, hide it, hide it. Sorry. Everyone, the count of 3, type it in the chat and let's see if we all have the same response.
So we might not all have the same response. It might be different, but ECIS is near the top and we're a small organization.
Wow.
Can you all click on it so the trick keeps working as well for me? But you know, that's a really small thing, you know, and we haven't paid for this. This has just happened organically. And one of our schools in Ghana called us up and told us, and then Washington phoned and told us that it was happening. So, you know, when we say little things bring huge change, we can really prove that and we can show you how that happens. So never be afraid, be courageous, just do little things all the time.
I love it. And I think both Estelle and Cam are people that you can reach out to in terms of looking at inclusion, looking at diversity, and how you move that forward. If you are feeling overwhelmed between all the resources that are available on social media, at times you just need to talk to that one person, maybe Estelle, maybe Cam, to say, I'm not sure where to begin. Where would you recommend? And I think those 2 pieces of advice are fabulous in terms of intentionality and small effects. But Estelle, you mentioned something that I want to follow up on, that you said that you don't shy away from having hard conversations, but still you must have a high level of trust in an organization for that to happen. But I'm going to take it a step further. In terms of reflecting back, what advice would you give in terms of looking at conflict management? Because not every organization has that level of trust, where at times when there is some type of discord, people rather just be quiet and just stay in their silos rather than trying to engage in those type of conversations. So how do you work with, in terms as a leader, or advice that you would give new leaders in terms of conflict management?
That's a great question. If I look at the example of the organization I'm working in, the International School of Dakar, the genesis of our diversity, equity, and inclusion, social justice work was grounded in a form of conflict and frustration. It came from the students, from an Instagram page created by our students who were explaining how it felt to be Black at ISD. And this was the beginning of a huge campaign of change. People looked inside and we started to wonder how we can make the students' experience better. In other contexts, this could have triggered a lot of window dressing, a lot of defensiveness. I've seen this happen. But it wasn't the case for 2 reasons, I think. The first one is the students' movement was grounded on a high level of love for the school. It came from a place of do better, we love you, ISD. And that love for the school was shared across the community in so many different ways. We are a very close-knit community that we were able to collectively look at ourselves in the mirror and say, yes, we're going to start this journey together. We will do better. So I'd say conflict management comes from, the good conflict management comes from a place of allowing conflict to happen, harvesting it, and seeing it as an opportunity to grow.
Oh, Estelle, I love what you said, but I think that's because of you as a leader, that you were, let's say everyone talks about an open door policy, but from what you're saying, I sense that your staff knew that you were ready to take on these type of conversations. So as a leader, that's a credit to you, because a lot of leaders would just say, you know what, we're not ready for this, or they don't even acknowledge it, but you were ready to acknowledge it within your setting.
Absolutely. It's actually one of the reasons why I came to my school, because I had seen this work done and the way they handled the humility and the intentionality of the work of inclusion. That was really a great encouragement for me to come to ISD. But as a whole, I think we can think of conflict management in general as an opportunity to wonder where we are as leaders, what we feel is really important when people come to us with something that is, we feel is aggressive, is negative. If we are in a place where we feel grounded, we have clear vision, and our aim is really to improve the place where we are, I think we take criticism positively. It's our defensiveness is often based on our fragility and fear, and that's what we have to fight. We have to fight against ourselves to implement solid conflict management, I feel.
And also, I so much agree. It's having that confidence, knowing that this is not about me, but also looking at it almost a third person of the impact it's having on the school, the impact it's having on the students as well in terms of relationships. Great advice, Estelle. I love the idea of reflecting on your own leadership skills. Cam, moving to you, conflict leadership, and also it leads to self-care as well in terms of looking at yourself, being able to reflect on your own attributes, and then how do you move forward and acknowledge these conversations rather than just going to avoiding it?
So I think conflict is a really important part of any organization. And again, I think it's exactly what Estelle says. It's having a check on your own biases. So I've always got lots of ideas, and I think we can do this, and we'll do that, and we'll do this. And then Sarah, my colleague, will unpack it for me and challenge me. And then we pack it back together and say, actually, this and this and this will work. And that's really useful. And I really value all those conversations I have with many people in the ECIS community, not just in ECIS, who go, really, how's that going to work? And actually, I just saw that Conrad joined, and I've recently had a few conversations with Conrad about the task force as well. And it's really helped me think about things in a different way. So I really appreciate that conflict or those comments that help you think about things in a different way, because it's really easy, especially when you get to your 50s, to sort of think how you've always thought. And that's why I'm really keen to always be learning more things, to change my own vision, my own views. So talking about self-care, this is a really important one. So with women and with myself, that's one thing I would always say to my younger self, self-care. I'm a mother, I've been a working mom, I'm a wife. And I think rather than using my superpowers, sometimes I just tried to be a superwoman and tried to do all the things that I'm not really good at, but I felt I had to do. So self-care is so important. And the other thing is, especially if you're an activist, so I am an activist, incorporating some rest, some fun time, some soothing activities into your life is really, really important. And that the whole thing about health, sometimes I sit at my desk and it's dark in the morning when I start and it's dark when I leave, and I know that's not good for me. So I have a relatively grown-up daughter whose PA I am, obviously, and she's 23. So I really instilled in her self-care, Krishma, join the gym, I'll pay for your tennis, make sure every day you go and do these things, because I see that as a failing on my own part, that I didn't really always put self-care first. And I think that's a really important piece of advice to my younger self. And also, we all need to embrace our superpowers opposed to trying to be super women.
Absolutely. I'd like to build on what you just said, Cam, about self-care and lead it towards forgiving yourself as well. In this work, DIJ work, educational work, we can make mistakes based on our biases because we didn't know better. We mustn't let these mistakes stop us from growing. I'd like to refer here, as we're talking about our younger selves, to a mistake I made a long time ago as a little girl that basically led me to do this work. I had a friend a girlfriend who was an albino girl. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and everybody was always picking on my friend. And I would, you know, stand next to her and keep being a friend. One day it was just too much. I decided that it was too hard to be her friend. And when people came for her, I kept silent. And then I changed friends and I left her behind. And obviously I was aware of the fact that this was wrong. And it has stayed with me as a 9-year-old, as a 10-year-old, wondering how this albino friend felt when I abandoned her. And this mistake that I made, I had to learn to forgive myself for it and to decide to do better. And I always think about this, about the person who is minoritized, the person who is in the spots of that friend who I was a bystander for, instead of actively protecting her. And that mistake I've harvested through the work that I'm doing today. Let's forgive ourselves for the mistake that we made, for the lack of judgment that we have sometimes, and use it to do better and to build better communities and societies.
You know, the idea of just forgiving yourself and using that as a platform to learn from, I think is some of the best advice, because I know many friends of mine who are in leadership that when something, a bad decision, not a bad, but maybe a judgment was not as clear, at one point you have to let it go and use that as a platform to learn from. And that's what you've done with the work that you're doing with diversity and inclusion, and Cam as well, the idea of not trying to be, you know, everything to everyone, but at one point allowing, I would say we need to stop at one point, you know, to reflect on our own well-being, because if we're not looking after our own well-being, how are we able to support others? So I feel both of you have just touched upon points. I can see many people nodding, saying, yes, at one point we do have to forgive ourselves, which is a very powerful statement. I think it's now time for everyone to meet each other. So we're going to go into some rooms, and what we're going to do now, please, is we've just had a beautiful about 25 minutes with Estelle and Cam, just sharing some of their ideas in terms of conflict management, self-care, and also looking at school culture. So when you're going to go into the rooms, what I would like you to do is to really think about what is something that what you heard from the last 25 minutes or so that you really agree with and you would like to extend or elaborate on, or something that you argue with, that you feel like, you know what, this really didn't resonate with me, I don't see the application, or something that you aspire to in what you just heard, or was there an assumption made? So you pick one of the A's to really focus on during your conversation. There's going to be about 3 to 4 in a room for 12 minutes because we want you to have some conversation. And also please be aware of the time. So it might be a good idea to assign a timekeeper, so we ensure that we have equal voice when we go into these smaller sessions. And it's really time to unpack 12 minutes, and there'll be, I think Abby will have a 60-minute countdown. So it's a good 13 minutes with a smaller group of no more than 3 to 4. So think about, while we're getting the rooms ready, pick 1A, which is an argue, an agree, aspire, or assume that you will discuss in your rooms. So Abby, how are we doing?
Good. It's 4 in a room for all of them.
Wonderful. So everybody enjoy. Please make sure you introduce yourselves, say hello, and enjoy this time. And we have a nice long period just for you to enjoy this conversation. So the rooms will be open and we'll see you in about 13 minutes. Everyone, I hope you were able to just make new connections during this time. It's so good to see so many people. Anybody want to share an agree and that you had with, we already had agree starting with the little things. Thank you, Sarah, for already sharing. Love you, Sarah. Just beautiful. Anybody want to unmute? You can also put anything that from your group in terms of what you agreed with, and don't taking the ripple effect in terms of intentionality. We heard about the listening groups. Any agrees that you had, you can put in the chat, or you can just literally unmute yourself and share. Don't be shy. There aren't shy people in this room. I see some smiles now. There's no shy people. They're like, I'm not saying anything. No way. Also quiet.
I will offer myself to speak.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Nancy.
Great.
Hello, everyone. So I'm in the Netherlands here, and I am in my third year as an international educator. And one thing that I shared within my group is that I had an assumption coming into today's webinar. And I think with so many information that was shared today was really helpful. It was also the reminders that I needed to hear yet again. And I think one of the assumptions and just ideas that I shared with my group is wanting to come into the space with, not having maybe years of international experience or being in the decision-making process. How can educators really feel safe enough to talk to leadership without the defensiveness, or I should say within today's climate, right, around race, around making sure that we're hitting the agendas to DEIB? How can educators who are representative of the BIPOC community feel comfortable enough to say, these are the concerns, these are the ideas, the creative ideas that we can see to implement more diversity without worrying about it backlashing on you or being intimidated to speak up without the consequences of something, affecting your career in this industry. And so that was just something that I had an assumption that I may be taking away some advice on how to just navigate this space when it feels so intimidating, or, as a woman where it seems like there's a big boy club of whatever you say can actually do more harm than actually help this school. And so that's just something I shared within my group.
Any advice I see some people nodding that I know have quite a bit of experience. I see Liz smiling right now, who I know I've heard her talk about this topic many times, and Estelle as well. Liz, you want to give some insight? I know this is something that I've heard you speak so well about.
Well, I don't know if I'm overly coherent today. I was telling my group I've had a rough day, one of those days where all the things that happen that you read about happens. It's one of those. So it's been a bit rough. What I'd say, it's really interesting about voice and how important it is for those of us that have voice. So those of us that are directors of schools, CEOs, how we use that to path the way for others. And I think there are really simple things about, we talk a lot about recognizing the voices in the room. So when we hear an idea, when a colleague shares something, so those that maybe we don't always hear so often, is to try and find explicit ways of doing that. You did that really nicely today, Nancy, when you talked about the timing in the room and who are we listening to and how do we allocate time. And for me, it's about advocating for others. So in my career, I've always said yes to everything, which has caused a bit of a work-life balance issue. But we'll park that. But the question now is, now that when you have an opportunity to be on a board or to represent an organization, that you take that and then you use that as a vehicle to bring others with you. And so but I'd say if all of us do that in all of the roles that we have, whether that's with our students or our colleagues, then we start to make those small changes that Cam was talking about, those incremental changes, and it makes a difference. It makes a difference when you start to hear different voices, when you start to have different representations able. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice, is to take the opportunities that come, and then when you take them, take people with you.
Thank you, Liz. Estelle, I saw you nodding as well. I thought, what advice would you give Serenity as well? Because I saw you nodding the whole time while she was speaking.
Thank you, Serenity, for sharing these insights. Being a BIPOC person in international education, being a minority in general, it's challenging to share your voice in these spaces, educational and others. It does not necessarily change when you're in a position of leadership. It's always, you always need to remember your experience and keep your authenticity to support the minoritized voice. Just remember that if you don't speak, who's going to do it? It's a huge responsibility, but it's also a huge hope for minoritized group to take that responsibility of speaking to support others who might not have the courage, the strength right now to speak. And also to understand, as Cam was saying earlier, that we need to be mindful of self-care. At one point, you have spoken a lot and you are exhausted. Listen to yourself and take a step back and allow others the opportunity to speak as well. You know, it might come in waves. When you feel the strength to do it, go ahead, speak.
That was lovely, Estelle. Thank you. Cam and Estelle, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I was wondering what would be. Yes, it's 4 minutes. So really, I just need one, really, what would be your final thoughts that you would share with these group of educators that we have with us tonight? Cam, you want to start off, please?
Yes, so just a quick thing from me. I read a really great book yesterday and this morning. It's called My Grandmother's Hands, and it's by Reshma Menachem. We'll send it to you when we send you the recording. It's absolutely brilliant. Please read it. And it talks about a lot of the things that we've discussed today, how we can all lift each other. And I always say, my leadership is just a platform for however long it is, to lift up as many people as I can onto it. And we have that in common in this room. You know, never be afraid, just be really brave and say it. And guess what? People will link with you. You'll find your people. Just be brave. That's what I say to everyone. You know, courage in everything we do. And it's really great to see you all. Thank you so much for joining today. And thanks for letting me join, Nancy, as your little step in today.
You're fabulous. And Estelle, final thoughts before we go, please.
Final thoughts. I would leave you with the idea of Ubuntu, which highlights our interdependence. You know, let's remember that no matter what we're doing in international education and in education as a whole, our aim is humanity and unity. I want to leave you with the image of the Senegalese fast bus. It is a very, very colorful bus where there are lots of drawings, colors, and messages, where lots of people get in to go together from one point to the next. So I want to say, let's go together. Let's go within a context where we understand that, you know, beauty and purpose is built via interdependence and togetherness. Yeah.
Estelle and Cam, that was so beautiful. Truly, everybody, do we just feel like, just take a breath and reflect on those final words in terms of resonating with our heart? And that's what we started off with. We don't want this conversation to leave. I'm hoping that we can continue these connections. I had someone write to me saying, how else could I get a mentor? Who could I go to? I just want to share with you the idea of how do we continue this type of discussion. In the chat right now, I'm putting in there, which is the ECIS mentorship platform. This is an avenue for you to connect with like-minded educators who share similar areas of interest that you might want to connect with. It's something that we're trying to really elevate, and just looking at everybody in this room today, think of the collective knowledge that we have. Imagine that we can then have that ripple effect and really sharing that with our own organizations as well. So we want to thank everyone for being here. Everyone has to unmute right now, because we have to give a round of applause to Estelle and Cam. Everyone unmute. Please unmute. We have to mute. You touched our hearts tonight. And a very big shout out to Estelle and Cam, and also to the wonderful Women in Education Special Interest Group. We have Erin, we have Liz, we have Proserpina, we have Pauline. We're going to continue. Our next event is coming up in March with the fabulous Liz Freed, as we're talking about. Liz, what is the title? We're doing Embrace the Equity, I believe.
No idea. It's going to be marvelous.
It's going to be marvelous, but please join us. And we want to thank you for being here. One thing that I always like to do before is just really a big hug to you all. So just a big hug to everybody, and all the best to you and your families. Thank you for being here, everybody. Good night and have a good evening. Michael, I'll see you on Monday. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.